Hey, what's going on? Ed Fletcher here, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the 4th of July and what's going on, both in sort of the current climate of COVID-19 and historical climate of how blacks relate to July 4. So, as you may have heard by now, COVID-19 numbers are spiking rapidly across the country, the South, urban areas, rural areas. It's really quite alarming, and at least in California, they are tamping down on reopening plans. So bars will be closing, in-dining restaurants will be closing, and they're urging people to take more care than we have been. And that means wearing a mask, washing your hands frequently, not touching your face, and practicing physical distancing, and really, to a certain extent, eliminating or refraining from activities that bring you close to a lot of people. And they put a lot of the blame on house gatherings and parties and family events, but it's a lot harder for them to tamp down on those. But I think some of the thought is that if you control what you can control and you send the message that this is serious, that people will behave accordingly. So I'm advising people that July 4 is canceled, so you might as well spend that time camping with your family or with a small group, but not these big celebrations. Come on, Darla, let's go. But I also wanted to talk about historically July 4th and African Americans, because I've never been a big July 4th fan, but I've never actually talked about why or kind of got into it with white people, or even just sort of discussed it publicly. But as a young black kid growing up, when you learned about the Declaration of Independence, it doesn't take long to wonder why those founding fathers didn't think those words applied to you, and that did they sign this document begrudgingly, or did they just not think that black people were men? And that's troubling. So it doesn't take long for black people to sort of question, is 4th of July really for them, and to examine these inconsistencies. So let's talk a little bit more about the 4th of July. And what we're celebrating is July 4, 1776, a year after they had declared war on the British. The 13 colonies come together to articulate their concerns with the British government and why they broke. And they wrote, or Thomas Jefferson penned these like immortal lines: "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Great words, but they didn't prove to be true or accurate or apply to African Americans, then slaves. And while they may have been a great sort of founding formation of the country, and words that helped shape the Constitution, the fact of the matter is that they didn't believe the words, or they didn't believe those words applied to African Americans. So it made me think about Frederick Douglass and what Frederick Douglass said about the July 4. And I'm not a big scholar or anything, but I went and looked it up. You should look up Frederick Douglass, the abolitionist. He was a slave who escaped slavery and then became a leader of the abolitionist movement, and gave a great address, 1852, about the July 4th, and he says that this 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. And he really just talked about the hypocrisy of those founding fathers signing that document and not believing the words, or not believing that those words applied to African Americans. So African Americans historically have had a hard time with July 4, and I would show up and participate, and we would have neighborhood 4th of July celebrations and blow up fireworks, but never really cared for thinking about the words. And it's really hard to celebrate a holiday when you don't really believe what you're celebrating, or that it's the truth. So that's why black people have had a hard time with July 4. And this year there was a lot of talk about black people boycotting July 4, or using the time to point to the Black Lives Matter movement. And at a certain extent, all of that's kind of moot right now, because the virus is speaking and it's telling us to stay the fuck home. And sorry about that F word. Stay home and chill out this July 4th. So this is going to be a weird one. We shouldn't gather. We shouldn't be getting together. We should be trying to protect ourselves and living through this pandemic and adopting in ways that we hadn't imagined before. My thoughts on July 4th and 4th of July. Thanks a lot for checking us out. Ed Fletcher here in Colonial Heights. Loyal to the soil, ever forward. Talk to you later.